There's a special kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just sits in your chest and tightens when you're forced to smile for the people who keep proving you don't belong. Imagine showing up for your own brother's big day, dressed on time trying to do the right thing, and a guard looks at you like a stranger and says, "You're not on the list." Tonight we're not here to cheer for humiliation or to point fingers and call it karma. We're here to step into the quiet space between pride and cruelty. And notice how easily love turns conditional when status walks into the room. Sometimes the loss isn't the moment you're pushed aside. It's the years you spend shrinking so nobody feels threatened by your existence. Because in this story, the laugh comes first. He's not even on the list. And then in one cold official sentence, everything flips Admiral. Front row. The room stands. A family freezes. And a brother's hand starts to tremble as the truth hits hard. If you've ever been erased in plain sight, stay with me. Let me tell you what happened next. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say, listening in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And if you've ever been dismissed, misunderstood, or made to feel like you don't belong, subscribe and stay with me. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're proof you're not alone. And now, let me tell you everything. I drove over the Coronado Bridge that morning with the windows down, letting the Pacific air sting my face. May in San Diego always smelled like salt and hot concrete. My hands gripped the steering wheel like I was preparing for impact, even though I wasn't in combat anymore, or at least not the kind anyone could see. The naval base was already buzzing. Families in sundresses and collared shirts clustered near the security gate, holding phones up for photos, waving at officers in uniform. A few toddlers clung to their dad's legs like they knew enough to be proud. I parked in the outer lot and walked the last stretch alone. I wasn't in uniform, not visibly. Just a plain jacket zipped up over everything that mattered. No insignia, no ribbons, nothing they could spot and react to. I'd made a choice today. I would show up like the version of myself they wanted me to be. Unimpressive. Unremarkable. Easy to forget. That was always the role, wasn't it? Come behave, disappear. I'd played it so long I could recite the lines in my sleep. The guard at the security checkpoint was polite, young. His eyes scanned my ID, then flicked to the digital guest list on his tablet. His finger hovered mid-scroll. I saw it immediately, how his posture shifted from routine to awkward. Name again, he asked, though he already knew. Archer Vale. He nodded slowly, lips pressed. I've got Conrad Vale, Lorraine Vale, Sloan Vale. And his eyes skimmed again. Colton Vale, of course. I nodded once. I'm aware. No Archer Vale, he added. Regret coated his tone like a bandage that didn't stick. I didn't respond, didn't flinch. It didn't hit me like lightning. It hit like confirmation. My name wasn't missing. It had been removed. Cleanly. Deliberately. And right on cue, the family SUV pulled up. Colton stepped out first, his dress whites blinding in the morning sun. The brass on his shoulders caught the light like he knew it would. The familiar strut of someone raised to believe a spotlight was his birthright. He looked right at me, glanced at the guard's tablet, and let out a laugh that carried farther than it should have. He's not even on the list, he said loudly. I saw the way the guard's eyes darted between us, unsure if he was witnessing a joke or a fracture. Dad got out next. His jaw was tight, not from concern for me, but because public embarrassment disrupted the image. Mom followed, adjusting her scarf like the moment was too inconvenient to acknowledge. Sloan lingered behind Colton, her smile thin, controlled, like she knew exactly what was happening and approved. The guard cleared his throat. Sir, I'll have to ask you to step aside while I... It's fine, I said. I stepped back, slow and deliberate. I won't hold up the line. He nodded, relieved. The line of families kept flowing past, barely glancing at the man left standing alone. Me. I didn't call out to Colton. I didn't plead. I didn't try to explain. That silence, that was the point. For years they'd written me out of their narrative in invisible ink. I just let them think it stuck. But in my pocket, my secured phone buzzed once. No caller ID, no preview. Just one short vibration like a code. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. It wasn't for them to know yet. Then I heard it. A low, heavy engine. The kind you only heard in government vehicles. Not civilian, not decorative. I didn't turn around. Not yet. I just clenched my jaw eyes on the gate on the family who still thought I was the failure outside the frame. Took them long enough, I muttered. And just like that, the picture they thought they'd painted so cleanly was about to change. There's a room buried deep under San Diego where no phones work and no clocks tick. The air tastes recycled, and the hum of the servers never stops. They call it the vault, but I call it mine. You don't get into the vault with a resume. You get in with scars and silence. Every morning I badge in through 4 layers of security. My face scanned my gate, analyzed my clearance, re-verified. When I enter, I'm no longer the brother they laugh at. I'm not even Archer Vale, not exactly. I'm the node, the handler, the reason half the globe's fires don't spread. They think I sit at a desk. In reality, I stand before a mosaic of moving maps and pulsing data signals that speak in whispers only a few of us understand. Every pixel is a life. Every delay is a cost. You don't get emotion in this job. Emotion slows the hand. One night last fall, around Euro 200, my headset lit up with a tone I hadn't heard in 6 months. A red-level intercept pinged near the Strait of Hormuz, minor deviation easily dismissed. But something felt off, too clean, too rehearsed. I flagged it, pushed back on protocol, rerouted a unit already in motion. They changed course with 12 seconds to spare. 12 seconds. Colton texted me that same night a joke sent from his honeymoon cruise. Something about paper pushing, and how's the cozy desk life. I remember looking at the screen and thinking you have no idea your name was almost part of a headline. But I didn't respond. I never do. Because in my line of work, the only reward is knowing disaster didn't happen. After that shift, I drove home as the sky turned gray. I made coffee no one drank. I sat on the edge of a couch that felt too clean, too staged, like everything in my life had been made for someone else. And I remembered something small. A barbecue, years ago, our backyard in Encinitas. Dad grilled steaks like they were metals, not meat. Everyone toasted Colton's promotion even though it was more ceremonial than anything earned. I'd just come back from a mission, a real one. I had a commendation in my pocket, the kind they don't hand out lightly. I tried to tell them. I tried to share. Dad looked up once, nodded, and said, "Good. Now let's focus on your brother." That's when I learned. My wins didn't fit in that house. There was no room for them. So I packed the medal away, not out of shame, but because pride only matters when there's someone to see it. Later that day, back in the vault, I got called into a secure office. A man I respected, whose name I'll never say, closed the door behind me. His voice was low, no ceremony. "It's time," he said. "Parts of Glass Tide are going public." I didn't ask why. I already knew. They needed someone the public could clap for. Someone they thought they'd overlooked. Someone who, when placed beside the perfect son, would suddenly change what hero meant. I nodded once. Not for approval, but for preparation. Because the moment I stepped back at that gate and said nothing, I already knew the next frame belonged to me. I knew my name wouldn't be on that list. That wasn't some clerical error or last-minute oversight. It was a deliberate omission, sanctioned, calculated, and executed under protocols that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with national security. And yet I let it happen. I didn't correct them. I didn't warn them. I didn't ask for understanding. Because letting them erase me was the only way to show them who they were when no one was watching. The order came through 3 days before the ceremony. I was to attend not in any official capacity, not as Admiral Vale, not with cameras flashing or a press release sent out ahead of me, but quietly. No security detail, no uniform visible. My rank was to be concealed, my presence unannounced. Arrive on time, maintain visibility, observe. You will be acknowledged when signaled. That was the directive. The front row seat had been arranged, but the path to it was meant to be Educational. My clearance badge didn't get me onto the guest list. It couldn't. Because if it had, it would have triggered inquiries. Why was someone of my clearance level attending a mid-level officer's commendation ceremony? What operation required a black-level intelligence figure embedded at a Navy graduation? Those questions were dangerous. So for once, omission wasn't an insult. It was the cost of secrecy. A secrecy that protected not just me but the entire architecture behind Glass Tide. Still, that omission became their weapon. It started the night before. Mom called her tone the carefully arranged softness she reserved for passive correction. Make sure you wear something presentable, sweetheart. You know how Colton gets flustered when things feel off. A pause. Then, it's a big day for him. Then Dad. Don't make this about yourself. And Colton loud and unserious over speakerphone with Sloane's laugh layered underneath pack your laptop. Wouldn't want you getting bored if the speeches run long. Not one of them asked if I needed a ride, or if I'd be sitting with them, or if I was okay. Just subtle reminders of my place beneath theirs. I said nothing, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because every word I didn't speak was a mirror I handed them. The morning I stood in front of my open closet, I took down the pressed uniform, the one with full decorations and insignia, then set it aside. Instead, I chose the same neutral coat from a dozen other official but unremarkable assignments. The kind of thing that blurred the lines. I needed them to see what they wanted to see. Until they couldn't. I drove across the Coronado Bridge again, same salt air, same glare off the water. But my mind was quiet this time. No dread, just patience. I knew what was coming. At the base's security gate, the same young officer stood guard. Clipboard scanner practiced posture. I handed over my ID. He scanned it, paused. His eyebrows twitched. Just a moment, sir. He checked the guest list. I watched his finger slide down the screen. Conrad Vale, Lorraine Vale, Sloane Vale. I don't see an Archer Vale. I didn't react. I knew this part. The SUV behind me rolled to a stop. Doors opened. Colton stepped out first, his uniform crisp face glowing with self-importance. He saw me standing there, and the grin was immediate. He's not even on the list, Colton laughed loud enough for the young officer to hear. Classic. Dad didn't speak. He didn't ask questions or challenge the moment. Just looked away like I was background static. Mom adjusted her scarf, made a soft clicking sound with her tongue like she disapproved of the scene but couldn't quite place the blame. And Sloane, well, she looked at me like the universe had proven her right. I was asked to step aside. I did. No protest, no flash of ID, no calling rank. I stepped back and stood there, just another forgotten guest with the wrong last name. But this time something changed. I looked down at my phone. No text, no incoming call. Just a silent ping, encrypted. A vibration so specific only one group in the world used it. I tapped the side once, then tucked the phone back into my coat. Don't move. Don't speak. Let them dig. Colton's smile widened like he'd just scored in a game. He was enjoying himself. They all were in their own ways. And I let them. Because the point of the exercise wasn't to stop them, it was to show them. This wasn't just about personal shame anymore. This was a test. A test of who they were when no one corrected them. And every second they failed it, I was taking notes. I felt the rumble before I heard it. Low, steady, authority on four wheels. The guard stiffened, his shoulders squared. His voice dropped an octave as he radioed in a confirmation. Something was approaching, something bigger than all of them. And Colton, who had been basking in the warmth of his own punchline, suddenly blinked. His posture shifted. His hand, the one loosely dangling by his side, began to twitch. Like some part of him instinct maybe realized the joke was about to turn on him. The vehicle that pulled up was one of those matte black unmarked SUVs that didn't need decals to declare who they belonged to. You just knew. Windows tinted to the legal edge. Engine hum that didn't idle, it vibrated. The moment it stopped, the air changed. The young officer at the gate straightened instinctively. His tone turned clipped formal. He stepped back, eyes scanning the badge behind the windshield before reaching for the remote barrier controls. The back passenger door opened. General Elias Hawthorne stepped out like he had been standing just beyond the horizon this whole time waiting for the cue. Full dress uniform, medals gleaming. The kind of posture that quiets entire rooms without saying a word. He didn't stop to adjust his cuffs or glance at a clipboard. He looked around once, took in the scene in 3 seconds flat, the hold-up at the gate, me standing aside, the family frozen mid-smugness. Then he spoke. Admiral, front row. 3 words. The effect was seismic. The young officer flinched. Sir, yes, sir. He fumbled to salute, immediately opening the barrier. Apologies, Admiral. There it was, out loud. No mistaking it. No taking it back. Admiral. Colton's face lost shape. He didn't look at me. He looked at the general, then at the officer, then back at the general, searching for a misheard syllable, a punchline, anything that could undo what he just heard. He found nothing. My mother's hand went to her chest. A performance, maybe. But there was no audience here to applaud it. Dad's mouth opened, closed, opened again. And Sloane. She just stared. Not with anger. Not even embarrassment. Just confusion. As if the story she'd written about me her entire life had just been redacted in real time. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at any of them. I simply stepped forward, acknowledging the general with a nod as a uniformed escort appeared to lead me toward the VIP entrance. Hawthorne walked beside me for a few beats before leaning in slightly. You good, never better. I can talk to them if you'd prefer. I shook my head. Let it settle. He didn't push. As we passed the seating area, another officer confirmed Admiral Vale's position is prepared and secure, front row per order. The general nodded. Escort him all the way. Let the camera catch it. Colton's posture had collapsed into something unfamiliar. Shoulders slack, eyes vacant, hands still trembling. The man who had laughed at the gate was gone, replaced by someone unraveling in plain sight. I walked past them again, this time as someone they didn't recognize, not because I had changed, but because they had refused to see. I didn't stop. I didn't break stride. I didn't offer them a lifeline to pivot into pride or apology. Not yet. As I entered the backstage area of the auditorium, I felt it shift. The humiliation was theirs now. Mine was done. But theirs had just begun. I didn't look back. Not when the usher pulled the velvet rope aside and motioned me to the front row. Not when the last words out of the general's mouth, Admiral, front row, still echoed like a seismic charge in the crowd. Not even when I felt the full weight of my family's stares burn into the back of my uniform. I didn't look back because this moment wasn't about them. Not anymore. The VIP holding room was quiet. No chatter, no ceremonial banter. Just the low hum of air conditioning and the faint scuffle of shoes outside the curtain. I stood alone for a moment, letting the silence settle over my shoulders like a second coat. I unbuttoned my overcoat and slid it off, folded it over one arm, slow and methodical. The double-breasted navy uniform underneath was pressed, polished, unassuming at first glance, until your eyes hit the silver stars on my collar. 2 stars. Rear Admiral. I adjusted the bars and brushed a thumb over the badge of service. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't need to. The fabric told its own story, a story no one in my family had bothered to ask. Outside, someone signaled. A short nod. Showtime. I stepped into the aisle leading to the front row, and immediately the energy changed. A colonel I'd worked with on an interbranch task force offered a nod. Another officer I'd once briefed during a classified op clapped me lightly on the shoulder. They said my name, not Archer, but Admiral Vale, and said it with ease. No fanfare, just recognition. Recognition earned, not gifted. I took my seat in the front row, third from center, close enough to see the engravings on the podium. My family sat 2 rows behind. I didn't turn around, but I could feel the tremor. Colton shifting in his seat. Lorraine probably blinking too much. My father, still processing. I heard murmurs behind me, Colton whispering something hurried to Sloane. Maybe to our father, like he was scrambling to re-script the narrative they'd written for today, trying to force my presence into a footnote, trying to make sense of a world where I wasn't the mistake. I didn't give them the satisfaction of turning around. From the corner of my eye, I caught General Hawthorne speaking quietly to one of his aides. The aide handed him a sealed envelope. The general read it, folded it, slid it inside his jacket with no reaction. But the movement was too deliberate to miss. A change was coming. One of the ceremonial officers stood near the wing's earbuds and checking his watch. Every 90 seconds. Always looking at the side entrance. I knew the timing was no accident. This wasn't over, and Colton was doing everything in his power to maintain his grip. He glanced toward the front row more than once, like I was a glitch in his carefully crafted moment. I knew the pattern. He wasn't just threatened by my presence. He was terrified of what it meant for his story. The MC walked out onto the stage, bright and crisp in his ceremonial whites. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we now begin the first commendation of the morning." I saw Colton rise stiff and a little too fast. He smoothed down his uniform jacket like he thought it added weight to his words. His hand still trembled slightly, just enough to betray him. I sat motionless, facing forward, breathing steady. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to witness the final act of the lie. Colton stood at the podium like it belonged to him, like he'd earned it, like the entire auditorium hadn't just watched a general call his older brother Admiral minutes earlier. He launched into his speech with the same effortless charm he'd used since we were kids, the kind of charm that always kept the spotlight centered on him whether he deserved it or not. He thanked the Navy. He thanked his commander. He thanked the unit. He thanked our father for his example, our mother for her strength. He even thanked Sloane, who beamed up at him like her smile could erase the last 20 minutes. But he didn't say my name. Not once. He saw me. He passed me. He looked straight at me when he took the stage. But when it came time to acknowledge family, he made a point of skipping over me like I wasn't even sitting there dressed in stars, flanked by generals. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't nerves. It was calculated. Colton wanted to be the only veil worth honoring. And if he had to erase me again to achieve that, so be it. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't let the audience see what I felt. I simply watched as my younger brother, desperate for a legacy, chose to craft it over the ruins of mine. He finished his speech. The applause was polite, military standard, nothing too emotional. He stepped down, eyes flicking once toward the front row, toward me, as if to measure whether I'd retaliate. I didn't need to. Because while he thought the show was over, I knew we were only at intermission. General Hawthorne stood from his seat. No ceremony, no announcement. He moved with purpose. One of his aides handed him a small folder, black unmarked. The general walked toward the stage, calm and direct. The MC hesitated for just a breath, then stepped back, microphone surrendered without a word. The audience sensed it too. Something shifted. A quiet pulse moved through the crowd. An alertness, as if everyone instinctively understood something unscripted was about to unfold. And Colton finally looked afraid. The general took the mic, adjusted it with one practiced flick. I stared forward, jaw set, heart hammering, but not from fear. This was the moment I'd been told to wait for. The moment I was told to be present for exactly as instructed. Front row, no fanfare, no preemptive moves. Let them walk into their own misjudgments. In the wings, one of the coordinators whispered a single phrase into his headset. I barely caught it, but I knew it. Glass Tide Phase 2. That was the trigger. I locked my hands in my lap and waited, because now there was no undoing what was coming next. General Hawthorne drew in a breath, and that was where it began. The silence before it broke wasn't heavy. It was surgical. General Elias Hawthorne took the stage like he'd always belonged there because he did. He didn't need the MC to introduce him. He didn't need to clear his throat. The moment he reached the microphone, the entire auditorium tilted toward him like gravity itself had shifted. The MC stepped back, his script limp in his hands. The air felt too still. Even the rustle of uniforms stopped. Then Hawthorne spoke. There is a brief addition to this morning's ceremony, authorized just hours ago in light of a recent declassification order from the Department of Defense. That was all he said. But in that one sentence, something snapped into place. A current surged through the room, visible only in how still everyone became. Officers stopped checking their watches. A few generals leaned forward, brows furrowed. Behind me, someone whispered, barely audible, "Wait, what's this?" I didn't move. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my back straight. I stared at the podium. I didn't look at Colton. I didn't need to, because he'd just lost control of the narrative. General Hawthorne continued. We often celebrate those we can see, those in uniform boots and the sand cameras rolling. But this morning I've been granted the rare honor of recognizing someone who served where no camera could follow. A figure in shadow whose work helped preserve the very lives we commend today. He paused. Let it sink in. I heard my mother shift behind me. I heard Sloane exhale slowly, like she was trying to keep her composure. I didn't hear my father at all. Then Hawthorne said the name. Operation Glass Tide. A ripple ran through the rows like a low-voltage current. The term wasn't familiar to most civilians. But the officers, the ones who'd been briefed, the ones who knew what it meant to keep the peace through invisible war, they sat straighter, more alert. Some exchanged glances. Some stopped blinking. The operation, Hawthorne said, now partially declassified, involved the tracking, decryption, and dismantling of an international weapons laundering network that spanned 4 continents, utilized over 50 shell entities, and was responsible for arms transfers that would have, if successful, placed high-yield weapons within range of U.S. naval assets in the South Pacific. Colton's posture shifted. I saw it from the corner of my eye. He stiffened, chin slightly forward, hands gripping his legs. The real success, Hawthorne went on, came not from the field, but from a command center. A room filled with screens and silence, where real-time decisions had to be made with incomplete data and impossible timelines, where the margin of error was seconds. And then came the moment. Hawthorne adjusted the mic slightly, not for volume, but precision. The officer who commanded that center, who authored the risk framework and predictive model still in use across 5 fleets, and whose leadership prevented a missile strike on the USS Porterfield last year. Colton jerked. Is here with us today. The auditorium was silent. Rear Admiral Archer Vale, United States Navy. Please stand. The sound of dozens, hundreds of chairs scraping back in unison is something I will never forget. It wasn't applause, it wasn't fanfare. It was a wave of discipline, a full military reflex snapping to attention. Everyone stood. Everyone except the 4 people sitting behind me. I rose calmly, deliberately, straight spine, level shoulders, like I had walked into a dozen briefings that ended with lives saved or lost. I took the steps to the stage without rushing, without theatrics, every step a beat in a drum line only I could hear. The general extended his hand. I saluted. First protocol never bends, and then we shook. He leaned in. Time to put the story where it belongs. He pinned the ribbon on my chest, silver and red. Then he faced the crowd again. This man's work didn't just shape strategy. It saved lives, including one many of you in this room know personally. He paused. The lights over the stage shifted slightly. Brighter now. Last July, a guided missile cruiser narrowly avoided a surprise attack during a refueling window. The analysis that triggered the countermeasure protocol came from Admiral Vale's unit 7 minutes before the launch window. 7 minutes. That was when it hit. Colton's body stilled like something in him had frozen. I didn't have to turn around. I could feel it. The sudden clarity. The story he had told about pulling off a miracle, about gut instinct and luck, was no longer his. The truth stood here, pinned to my chest, and that cruiser, Hawthorne continued, was the USS McKinley. Murmurs surged. That was Colton's ship. Everyone knew it. Let me be clear, the general said. Without this man's work, that ship wouldn't be here, and neither would her crew. A moment passed. Then came the applause. It wasn't polite, it wasn't ceremonial. It was thunder. A rising wall of sound that slammed against the walls and pulsed under my shoes. I finally looked. My father's face was blank. 1,000-yard stare in a brightly lit room. My mother's lips parted, eyes locked on my chest hand gripping the edge of her seat. Sloane looked caught between admiration and shame. And Colton, his hand was trembling uncontrollably, fingers twitching like a short circuit. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply let the moment be what it was not, a revelation. A reckoning. And I watched them not to receive their pride, but to let them sit in the consequence of the version of me they chose not to believe in. The reception was noise and sparkle. Medals glinting under chandeliers. Voices pitching high with celebration. I shook hands, nodded through commendations, accepted thanks from strangers who finally knew my name. But I kept one eye on the hallway. They came for me eventually, in a cluster, my family moving like a single organism, tight and bracing. Colton in front, my father slightly behind, Sloane to one side. My mother, last lips pressed into a shape that used to pass for grace. Colton spoke first. "Admiral," he said like the word burned his tongue. "You could have warned us." His voice cracked, half restraint, half venom. "You made us look like fools." I said nothing. That's when the general's aide appeared. Calm. Unapologetic. "There's a room available for a private conversation," he said. "It's best handled in there." A suggestion dressed like a command. I followed. So did they. The hallway to the private suite was long, carpeted, dead quiet. In that walk, I said nothing. I wanted them to feel the weight of what wasn't being said. I was no longer the son, the brother, the ghost in the corner. I was a man with a name, a rank, and the power of restraint. Inside the room, the tension ignited. Colton spun first. "You sat behind me while I gave that speech. You let me talk like I saved the day," I said flat. His jaw snapped shut. "You let me tell that story," he accused. "You let me believe I did it alone. You wanted to believe that I said. And no one could have convinced you otherwise. You think being a desk jockey makes you better than don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult the work that kept your ship from being sunk." My voice didn't rise, but it carved space like a blade. My father started to speak. I turned to him. "You ever ask what I actually do?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother tried next. "We just wanted peace." "No," I cut in. "You wanted silence, because the story was easier without me." I let that sit, let it ring out. "You didn't lose a son," I said. "You ignored one." Silence again. My secure phone buzzed on my hip. I silenced it. "Not yet." Then I looked at them. "I don't need an apology. I don't need a parade. But if I'm to remain part of this family, it starts with one thing." They waited. Respect. Not for my rank. Not for what I've done. For me. I stood. "I love you. I always have. But I will not stand in rooms where I'm erased." I opened the door. "And I don't owe you a second chance. You have to earn it." Then I left them there. In that quiet, sealed room alone with the story they never thought they'd have to tell. It was Sunday. The breeze off Coronado was light. I walked into the house through the back deck. There were new pictures on the wall, subtle changes. A new display case. My medals sat at the center. At dinner, my father asked about my next assignment with real interest. My mother didn't mention weddings or timelines, just passed me potatoes. Colton sat across from me, quieter than usual. He didn't brag, didn't deflect. After dinner, he joined me outside. He didn't stall. "I was scared," he said, "of how good you were, how much I didn't know. I mocked you because it made me feel taller." I nodded. "That's done now," he added, "if you let it be." I didn't say "I forgive you." I said, "Keep showing me." And that was enough, because now they saw me not as the one who vanished, but as the one who never needed a spotlight to matter. And finally, they knew I was never off the list. I just stopped asking to be on theirs. They always told me family was forever. But forever doesn't mean anything when it's built on silence, on dismissal, on the quiet decision to look away just because the truth makes someone uncomfortable. For years, I played the smaller role, the quieter brother, the one they forgot to count, because I never asked to be counted. I thought maybe if I just worked harder, gave more, swallowed the bitterness, they'd see me. They didn't. Not until they had no choice. Standing on that stage, hearing my name, feeling the weight of that metal against my chest, while the room stood still, that wasn't about revenge. That was about justice. About truth finally being louder than the lies they were comfortable with. I didn't need applause. I needed air. I needed space from the version of me they kept rewriting without my consent. Colton's hand trembled that day, not because I embarrassed him, but because reality shattered the illusion he had always relied on. For the first time, he had to see me not as the brother he could ignore, but as the reason he was still alive. And my parents. Maybe they meant well. Maybe they didn't. But well-meaning doesn't erase years of erasure. You don't get to skip the hard part just because you say sorry with a nice meal and a soft voice. I didn't owe them a performance of forgiveness. What I owed to myself was clarity and boundaries, and the choice to not let blood dictate where I belong. 6 months later, the medals are aligned differently in that house. My name is no longer the one they skip over when guests come. But here's the thing, even if it still was, I'd be okay. Because I no longer live in the shadows they cast. I've carved my own space. I've earned it. And I'm not afraid to take up room anymore. And that's the part people rarely see after the headlines fade. The quiet minutes when the house is finally still and you realize you're not celebrating, you're just breathing again. If there's anything to take from this, it's that we don't always get hurt because we were foolish. Sometimes we get hurt because we were loyal, because we wanted peace, because we kept giving the benefit of the doubt until it cost too much. And even then, there's something human that survives your instincts, your dignity, the small choice to keep going. If this story hit a tender spot, you're not alone. We all carry a moment we didn't think we'd make it through. And somehow we did. So if you'd like a place where stories like this can be heard without judgment, you're welcome here. You can subscribe not as a click, but as a way to join a community that listens, reflects, and shares what's real. And if you want to leave a few lines in the comments where you're watching from or what part stayed with you, no pressure. I read more than you think. Thanks for sitting with me through this. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.